Success is not always about working harder, knowing more, or moving faster than everyone else. True success comes from the ability to make the right decision at the right moment, skill that most people never learn. Every day, millions of people stay busy. They work, they rush from one task to another, and they return home, exhausted. Yet, when they lie in bed at night, they can't help but wonder, why does it feel like I haven't moved forward at all? The problem isn't hard work. The problem is direction. When you don't know where you're going, every road looks the same. Every opportunity feels tempting, and that's exactly where people lose themselves. Clarity is more than knowing what you want. It means understanding why you want it and what price you're willing to pay to achieve it. Without a strong why, goals collapse under pressure. Without a willingness to pay the price, goals remain nothing more than dreams. Strategic people don't just dream, they define their vision. They don't simply hope. They create a plan. They don't spend their lives reacting. They build their own direction. Clarity gives you the power to say no. When you don't know what you truly want, everything appears to be an opportunity. But when your purpose is clear, most distractions reveal themselves for what they really are. Sometimes disguised as excitement, sometimes hidden behind a false sense of urgency. A person with clarity is not afraid of the storm because they know exactly where they're going. Only those who have lost their direction panic when the weather changes. So here's the question. Do you know where you're going? Or are you simply walking because you're afraid to stand still? In the next episode, we'll discover how to filter through the noise of endless information and uncover the advantage that truly matters. Stay with Beyond Book Summaries for the complete journey through this book. I'm Abdur Rahim, and I'll see you in the next episode. Information by itself is not power. If it were, the smartest people in the world would simply be the ones who read the most, watch the most, consume the most. But that is not how life works. The people who win are not the ones who know the most facts. They are the ones who know how to turn facts into decisions, decisions into leverage, and leverage into results. We live in an age where information is everywhere. You can scroll for hours, watch videos for hours, read for hours, and still not become 1% sharper. That is because information without direction becomes noise, and noise does not help you. It distracts you. To grow, you need a filter. You need to ask a different question than most people ask. Most people ask, what is this? Strategic people ask, how can I use this? That single shift changes everything. The moment you start looking at information as potential leverage, your mind stops being a storage room and becomes a workshop. And a workshop is always more valuable than a warehouse. Every piece of information serves a different purpose. Some helps you make faster decisions. Some helps you avoid mistakes you have not made yet. Some helps you understand people before they explain themselves. When you learn to sort information by purpose, instead of letting it blur into one pile of trivia, you begin to think like someone who builds, not someone who collects. There is also a second habit worth noticing. Connection. When an average learner picks up something new, it sits alone in their mind like an isolated puzzle piece. A strategic thinker immediately asks, where does this fit? What does this remind me of? Over time, these connections form a map. And once you have a map, the world stops feeling confusing. You know where you are, and you know which direction moves you forward. The real enemy here is passive consumption. It feels like learning, but it rarely nourishes anything. Active learning is slower. You pause and question and apply. But it is the only kind that actually changes how you think. So ask yourself honestly, of everything you consume today, how much of it did you actually use? Or did most of it simply pass through you, leaving nothing behind? I'm Abdur Rahim. If this way of thinking speaks to you, you'll find the rest of this journey on Beyond Book Summaries. The modern world is built to make you impatient. Notifications, instant replies, quick wins, quick validation. On the surface, it feels efficient. Underneath, it quietly makes people fragile. Unable to sit with discomfort, unable to wait, unable to build anything brick by brick. Dangerous intelligence requires the opposite. It requires the ability to delay gratification, to sit with uncertainty, and to think in years instead of moments. And here is the part that most people miss. Compounding is not just a financial idea. It applies to skill, reputation, relationships, health, and knowledge. Every time you think long-term, you let compounding work in your favor. Every time you think short-term, you interrupt it right when it was about to get interesting. This is why so many people never see extraordinary results. Not because the path doesn't work, but because they abandon it before the curve bends upward. They quit in the quiet phase, right before it becomes loud. Long-term thinkers make fewer desperate decisions. They build real competence instead of chasing shortcuts, and they accumulate advantage quietly, so that by the time others notice the opportunity, the long-term thinker is already standing inside it. This changes how they treat mistakes too. Short-term thinkers hide their mistakes to protect their ego. Long-term thinkers study their mistakes to protect their future. It also changes how they treat people. Long-term thinkers value trust over transaction. They invest in relationships instead of extracting from them. And over the years, that builds something rare, a network of allies instead of a list of contacts. Allies open doors. Allies warn you before the storm arrives. That kind of leverage cannot be manufactured overnight. It can only be earned slowly. None of this means waiting passively. It means acting today, so tomorrow becomes easier. Planting something now that you may not see grow for years. So ask yourself, is the decision in front of you built for how it feels today, or for what it creates 5 years from now? I'm Abdur Rahim. Stay with this journey on Beyond Book Summaries. One of the most underrated signs of real intelligence is the ability to notice patterns, not just events, but the thread connecting them, not just what someone does, but why they do it, and what they are likely to do next. Once you develop this skill, life stops feeling random. You begin to predict instead of merely react. And even partial prediction gives you a serious edge. Everything around you carries a pattern. Markets have them. Human behavior has them. Even emotions have them. People who constantly feel blindsided are usually the ones who judge situations by how they appear in the moment, rather than by where they are heading. Strategic thinkers ask a different question, not what is happening, but where is this leading? This changes how you deal with people too. Once you recognize a pattern, someone who avoids accountability will avoid it again. Someone who blames will blame again. Their behavior loses its power to surprise or frustrate you. It also protects you from manipulation, because people who cannot see patterns treat every situation as brand new and fall for the same story twice. Pattern recognition is trainable. It starts with slowing down your instinct to label things instantly. Most people react, categorize, and move on within seconds. To actually see a pattern, you need to pause and ask, have I seen something like this before? And what happened last time? Cross-domain learning accelerates this. When you study psychology, business, and history side by side, you start noticing that the same underlying principles show up everywhere wearing different clothes. The domain changes, but the pattern underneath rarely does. There is one more place worth looking. Your own life. If every year starts to feel identical, it is not because the world refuses to change. It is because your patterns haven't changed. The same choices produce the same outcomes on repeat. So ask yourself, what keeps happening to you again and again, and why? I'm Abdur Rahim. More of this thinking is waiting for you on Beyond Book Summaries. The sharpest people you'll ever meet do not solve problems faster than everyone else. They prevent most problems from appearing in the first place. Instead of constantly putting out fires, they build lives where fires rarely start. Prevention doesn't look dramatic, which is exactly why it's so underrated. But it protects the 3 things that matter most: your time, your energy, and your momentum. Most people operate on an "I'll deal with it when it happens" setting. They wait for the emergency, and by the time they respond, the problem has multiplied. Financially, emotionally, or socially. Anticipation is almost always smarter than repair, but anticipation requires a habit most people never build: thinking a few steps beyond the present moment. One of the simplest tools here is inversion. Instead of asking, "How do I succeed?" ask, "How could this fail?" Failure usually has clearer causes than success does. Once you can name the exact ways a plan might collapse, you can quietly build safeguards around each one before they ever become real. Problems rarely appear without warning. There are almost always small signals first. A delay that keeps repeating, a discomfort nobody names, an inconsistency everyone shrugs off. People who get blindsided usually saw the signal and chose not to look closely. This kind of foresight takes emotional discipline, because thinking ahead often means facing an uncomfortable truth early, admitting that your current path isn't sustainable before anyone else notices. Avoidance feels safer in the moment, but it isn't a strategy. Facing reality early simply buys you more time to adjust. The hardest form of anticipation is turning it inward. Noticing your own procrastination, ego, or impatience before they sabotage a plan you actually care about. Most of the damage in anyone's life doesn't come from the outside world. It comes from personal habits colliding with reality. So ask yourself, what small, easy to ignore signal are you looking past right now that could become a much bigger problem later? I'm Abdur Rahim, and you can find more of this on Beyond Book Summaries. Every decision points you in a direction, and direction eventually becomes destiny. Most people decide based on what feels convenient right now. Chess players decide based on what a move creates 3 steps from now. That single difference separates amateurs from strategists in every part of life, not just on the board. A good move isn't just good in the moment. It has to be good in the sequence that follows. Many decisions look great instantly and collapse later because they trade a long-term cost for a short-term win. Strategic thinkers ask a slightly uncomfortable question before acting. If I do this, what happens next? And then, what happens after that? Chess also teaches the difference between a trade and a sacrifice. A trade exchanges something for something of similar value. A sacrifice gives up something valuable now for something far more valuable later. Nearly every real breakthrough in life requires a sacrifice of some kind. Comfort for growth, time for skill, ego for honest feedback. Short-term thinkers avoid sacrifice because they focus on the loss. Long-term thinkers embrace it because they focus on the return. There's also restraint. Not every open opportunity needs to be taken. Some options are traps wearing an attractive disguise. Quick money, easy validation, a shortcut that skips the real work. Strategic people learn to pause instead of pounce, because that pause is what buys them time to actually see what they're looking at. And finally, there's the difference between tactics and strategy. Tactics solve today's problem. Strategy defines where you're actually headed. Without strategy, tactics become nothing more than busy work dressed up as productivity. Strong decisions also require emotional stability, because fear inflates risk, anger shrinks consequences, and excitement erases warning signs entirely. Sometimes the smartest move on the board is simply choosing not to move yet. So ask yourself, was your last big decision made from a position or from an impulse? I'm Abdur Rahim. Keep thinking with us on Beyond Book Summaries. Your mind cannot produce anything better than what you feed it. A machine cannot output higher quality than the raw material it processes, and neither can your brain. If you want sharper thinking, sharper decisions, and sharper strategy, the upgrade has to start with what you consume. Not just content, but conversations, environments, and even the level of problems you choose to engage with. Most people consume information for entertainment, not enhancement. It feels stimulating, but it rarely changes anything. Light information is like light food. It tastes fine, but it doesn't nourish. For information to actually make you sharper, it has to challenge an assumption or stretch a boundary you hadn't questioned before. Conversation is one of the most powerful inputs of all, and one of the least examined. Spend enough time around people who complain, and complaining starts to feel normal. Spend enough time around people who build, and building starts to feel normal too. The mind quietly absorbs whatever energy surrounds it most often, which is why strategic people are careful. not out of arrogance, but because they understand how contagious standards really are. Environment works the same way, even when you're not consciously aware of it. Clutter creates distraction. Noise creates shallow thinking. Order creates clarity. A sharp mind rarely forms inside a chaotic room. There's a less obvious input worth naming: the size of the problems you engage with. Spend your energy on gossip, drama, and petty conflict, and your mental bandwidth stays tied up in the trivial. The people who outgrow small problems do it by simply refusing to feed them, saving their attention for the challenges that actually build something. Even the questions you ask yourself are an input. Why is this happening to me? Produces a victim's answer. Bordichadis, what is this trying to teach me? Produces insight from the exact same situation. So ask yourself, what did you feed your mind today? And did it nourish you, or just fill the time? I'm Abdur Rahim. Find the full journey on Beyond Book Summaries. Becoming dangerously smart isn't about having more facts stored in your head. It's about having better tools for processing the facts you already have. That's what a mental model gives you. A lens for making decisions, a shortcut for solving problems, a way to think faster with fewer avoidable mistakes. The first tool worth carrying is first principles, thinking, stripping away assumptions and asking, what is actually true here, instead of copying whatever everyone else is doing. This is how real breakthroughs happen, not by improving an old answer, but by questioning the question itself. The second is second-order thinking. Most decisions look fine when you only consider the immediate result. Real clarity comes from asking, and then, what happens because of that? Buying something cheap saves money today, but often costs more later. Second and third-order thinking is what separates people who plan from people who merely react. Then there's inversion. Instead of asking how to succeed, ask how you could fail. Failure usually has clearer, more visible causes than success does, which makes it easier to build around. Opportunity cost is another quiet but powerful lens. Every choice hides a cost. The thing you could have done instead. Time spent on distraction has a cost measured in growth you didn't get. Strategic people say no more often, not because they lack interest, but because they respect what their yes actually costs them. And finally, probability thinking helps you act without demanding certainty first, asking what's the likelihood this works, and what do I gain if I'm right, versus what do I lose if I'm wrong. This single habit protects you from both reckless gambling and permanent paralysis. No single model works for every situation. The real advantage comes from carrying several and knowing which one the moment calls for. So ask yourself, the last hard decision you made, which framework, if any, guided it? I'm Abdur Rahim. More frameworks are waiting on Beyond Book Summaries. Observation is one of the most underrated forms of intelligence. Not the passive kind, but the focused kind that studies detail, timing, motive, and reaction. People who talk constantly reveal a great deal about themselves. Their fears, their priorities, their insecurities. People who observe quietly collect all of it. This doesn't mean going silent. It means valuing what comes in before what goes out. How someone treats a person who can't benefit them tells you far more about their character than how they treat someone they're trying to impress. Who speaks first in a negotiation tells you who's trying to control the frame. These are not small details. They're the real data, everyone else is too busy talking to notice. Observation also protects you from illusions. Confidence gets mistaken for competence. Talk gets mistaken for action. Timing gets mistaken for talent. The ability to see past the surface is one of the rarest and most valuable forms of intelligence a person can build, and it only develops when you slow down your instinct to judge instantly. Conflict is a particularly useful place to observe. Tension reveals what casual conversation never does. The calm person reveals discipline. The insecure person reveals ego. The honest person reveals integrity. You learn more about someone in 5 minutes of friction than in 5 hours of small talk. There's also a quiet advantage to silence itself. In a world full of noise, restraint stands out. People who feel unthreatened tend to reveal more, their plans, their motives, their weaknesses. Simply because nobody is competing for the spotlight. The loud tend to impress, the quiet tend to extract. So ask yourself honestly, in your last conversation, were you gathering information or just waiting for your turn to speak? I'm Abdur Rahim. Watch closely with us on Beyond Book Summaries. Intelligence collapses the moment intense emotion takes over. Not because emotion is bad, but because it narrows perception. Fear makes you see only danger. Anger makes you see only offense. Excitement makes you see only opportunity, while every warning sign quietly disappears. When perception narrows, decisions get reckless, and the damage almost always becomes visible only after the emotion has already passed. Look closely at history's biggest personal disasters. Wasted money from an impulse. Purchase. A relationship destroyed by one angry sentence. A career derailed by pride, refusing to back down. None of these came from a lack of intelligence. They came from a lack of a few seconds of restraint. If strategic people build a small gap between the trigger and the response, they don't rush to react. They don't speak the first sentence that comes to mind. And they never make financial or relationship decisions while flooded with either euphoria or panic. That short pause is often the entire difference between a good decision and a regretted one. Fear deserves a closer look before you dismiss it. Instead of asking how to get rid of it, ask what it's actually trying to tell you. Is it protecting you or simply limiting you? Anger carries real energy too. The goal isn't to suppress it, but to redirect it toward improvement instead of retaliation. Even excitement, which feels entirely positive, can blind you to real cost and real risk if it's allowed to make decisions on its own. Ego plays a subtler role. It trades long-term advantage for short-term validation, making a small lost argument feel like a disaster and a small one feel like a victory, even when the win costs something bigger. So ask yourself, what is the last decision you made in an emotional extreme? And would you make it again with a calm mind? I'm Abdur Rahim. Stay grounded with us on Beyond Book Summaries. Clear thinking is powerful. Clear communication multiplies that power. Being sharp isn't only about knowing what to do, it's about being able to influence outcomes, shape perception, and move people. Without ever raising your voice, most people communicate reactively, speaking to release emotion rather than to achieve anything. Tactical communication is the opposite, intentional, measured, and aimed at a specific result. It starts with clarity. Most conflicts don't actually come from disagreement. They come from ambiguity. Strategic communicators say exactly what they mean, without forcing the other person to decode a hidden signal. The second principle is restraint. Just because something is true doesn't mean it needs to be said right now. Timing and dosage matter as much as content. Silence isn't weakness. It's a tool that forces the other side to reveal more and gives you the space to actually think before you speak. Listening deserves far more attention than most people give it. Most people listen only long enough to respond. Strategic listeners listen for tone, hesitation, and contradiction. Because information often hides in what someone avoids saying, not in what they actually say. Then there's framing, the way a message is packaged. Telling someone you're wrong invites resistance. Saying, here's another angle worth considering, invites openness. The content can be identical. The response rarely is. Conflict itself becomes a skill here too. Not every disagreement deserves a battle. Strategic communicators choose their conflicts, the way a chess player chooses squares, deliberately, and only when the position actually calls for it. Influence, at its best, isn't manipulation. It's alignment. It guides instead of demanding, and asks better questions instead of delivering longer explanations. Because a good question makes someone think, while an explanation usually just invites a debate. So ask yourself, the last time a conversation went badly, was it what you said or how you said it? I'm Abdur Rahim. Sharpen your voice with us on Beyond Book Summaries. Time is the one currency everyone spends, yet almost nobody knows how to invest. While most people chase speed, strategic thinkers chase sequence. The question isn't, how fast can I get there? It's, what is the smartest order of moves? Two people can spend the exact same hour in completely different ways. One produces progress. The other produces motion that looks like progress, but leads nowhere. The difference is never how busy someone looks. It's the direction underneath the busyness. Prioritization matters more than most people admit. Only a small number of tasks actually move anything forward. The rest is mostly noise wearing the costume of productivity. Strategic people identify that small, vital list and protect it fiercely, while everything else gets delayed, delegated, or simply dropped. Sequencing matters just as much. Doing things in the wrong order slows you down, even when you're working incredibly hard. Most real breakthroughs come from getting the order right. Learning before acting, preparing before scaling, and most wasted years come from skipping, a step that seemed optional but wasn't. Patience quietly multiplies all of this. When you can wait longer than the average person, you can hold a position others abandon out of impatience, right before it would have paid off. Constant urgency, on the other hand, produces shallow thinking and rushed decisions. It keeps you one step behind instead of one step ahead. Time also has a way of exposing the truth. Someone can say health matters or growth matters, but if no hours actually go toward it, it was never really a priority. Time reveals what words tend to hide. And finally, watch for time leaks. The small, quiet activities that consume hours without producing anything. Overthinking, drama, low-quality entertainment. None of them destroy you quickly. They destroy you slowly, a few minutes at a time. So ask yourself, where did most of your time actually go this past week? And does it match what you say you care about? I'm Abdur Rahim. Spend your time well with us on Beyond Book Summaries. Nobody builds anything meaningful entirely alone. Raw effort has a ceiling. There are only so many hours you can work and so much energy you can spend. Strategic people understand this early. So instead of relying purely on personal force, they build leverage, the ability to produce more with less, through tools, skills, and people. Tools are force multipliers. Even something as simple as a checklist or a calendar reduces friction. And when friction goes down, consistency finally becomes sustainable, which is where results actually live. Skills are an even more powerful form of leverage because they compound over years and travel with you everywhere. A single high-level skill, like clear communication, saves hours, prevents conflict, and opens doors that raw effort never could on its own. But the most powerful leverage of all comes from people. This isn't about using anyone. It's about recognizing that no individual, however talented, can scale themselves to infinity. A single skilled player can be good. A well-coordinated team wins championships. Real leverage comes from specialization, letting each person do what they do best, instead of trying to do everything yourself. Capital counts too, and not only money. Reputation, trust, and credibility all function as leverage, because they attract opportunities that others have to chase down manually. There's also leverage through distribution, something you create. Once that keeps producing value long after you've moved on to something else. That's how you escape the exhausting trap of trading every hour directly for an outcome. None of this works without honesty about your own weaknesses first. What should you stop doing yourself? That question feels uncomfortable because self-reliance is often praised as a virtue. But past a certain point, doing everything alone quietly becomes self-sabotage. So ask yourself, what is one task you're still carrying alone that a tool, a skill, or the right person could carry better? I'm Abdur Rahim. Build smarter with us on Beyond Book Summaries. Strategic people don't just react to what happens. They study how it happens. Every outcome is rarely an isolated, random event. It's usually the byproduct of a system. Habits, incentives, and feedback loops working quietly in the background. Once you learn to see the system, you stop being surprised by the result. Take health as an example. Most people treat it like an event. They get sick, then react. But health is a system built from sleep, food, stress, and movement. A healthy system produces predictable outcomes. A broken one does too. The unpredictability only exists for people who refuse to look at the structure underneath. The same logic applies to careers, relationships, and money. A promotion isn't an event. It's the result of a system of visibility, consistency, and value creation repeated over time. When you start thinking this way, your questions change. Instead of asking, "What happened?" you start asking, "What system produced this, and which lever, if adjusted, would change it?" This is also where feedback loops become visible. A small skill practiced daily builds confidence, which drives more practice, which builds more skill. A positive loop reinforcing itself. Avoidance works the same way in reverse, quietly feeding the very anxiety it was meant to escape. Incentives deserve special attention here, because they shape behavior more reliably than rules or good intentions ever do. People consistently do what gets rewarded and avoid what gets punished. If you want to change any system, yours or someone else's, changing the incentive is almost always more effective than changing the rule. Systems thinking also lowers emotional volatility. Instead of asking who's to blame, you start asking what structure produced this outcome, and that single shift tends to produce better solutions and far fewer arguments. So ask yourself, which recurring problem in your life is really a system issue you've been treating as a one-time event? I'm Abdur Rahim. Design better systems with us on Beyond Book Summaries. If there's one skill that outranks every other on this list, it's this: the ability to learn quickly, deeply, and independently. Knowledge goes out of date. Industries shift. Strategies expire. But someone who genuinely knows how to learn stays relevant no matter how much the ground underneath them changes. This is the meta skill that makes every other skill easier to acquire. Curiosity is where it starts. When you're curious, learning stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like discovery. Worry, why does this work? Turns the entire world into a laboratory instead of a chore. Connection comes next. The brain doesn't store facts in isolation. It stores them in networks. Every time you ask, "What does this remind me of?" or "Where else does this apply?" you're strengthening that network, and that's exactly what makes new knowledge stick instead of fading within a week. Focus matters more than most people admit in a world built for distraction. A single hour of deep, undivided attention outperforms 5 scattered hours of half attention every time, because real learning requires the brain to fully process what it's taking in, not just skim past it. Feedback closes the gap between what you think you're doing and what you're actually doing. And error tolerance might be the most overlooked factor of all. The fastest learners aren't the ones who avoid mistakes. They're the ones who treat every mistake as information instead of proof of failure and move forward without flinching. There's one final test worth remembering. If you can explain something simply to someone else, you actually understand it. If you can't, you probably don't yet. No matter how confident it felt in your own head. Across these 15 episodes, we've walked through clarity, patterns, emotional control, leverage, and systems. 15 different lenses for seeing life as something you can navigate with strategy, not something that just happens to you. None of it is magic. All of it is learnable. So ask yourself, one last time, of everything in this series, which single idea will you actually put into practice today? This is where our journey together ends. For now, I'm Abdur Rahim. Thank you for staying with me through all 15 episodes on Beyond Book Summaries.